Today is January 28th, 2014. Welcome to episode 79 of Let's Talk Bitcoin, a twice-weekly show about the ideas, people, and projects building the digital economy and the future of money. Visit us at letstalkbitcoin.com for our daily guest blog, all our past episodes, and of course, tipping addresses. My name is Adam B. Levine, and today I'm joining you in the audience as we watch the world change all around us. In what's got to be the fastest turnaround time ever in a Let's Talk Bitcoin episode, we're happy to bring you a 20-minute set of exchanges I found particularly interesting from the first panel of January 28th's BitLicense hearings, taking place in New York City. Lots of perspective. We'll let you decide. Over the weekend, the North American Bitcoin Conference was held in Miami, Florida. Record-breaking attendance was only one indicator of a very successful event, and today I'm pleased to share another talk from it. Neo and B are based out of Cyprus and are on track to be the first Bitcoin brick-and-mortar financial institutions around. We end today's show with George's talk on how things have gone since their successful fundraiser and what's coming with their upcoming launch. But first, LTB's Stephanie Murphy recently caught up with CEO of Overstock.com, Patrick Byrne, about their experiences so far, why they accepted Bitcoin, when he got his wallet set up, and more. Enjoy the show.
This is Stephanie Murphy for Let's Talk Bitcoin, and I'm here talking with Patrick Byrne. He is the CEO of Overstock.com. Hi, Patrick. Welcome to Let's Talk Bitcoin.
Stephanie, great to be on.
I think everybody who listens to this show has heard the news about Overstock.com starting to accept Bitcoin, and I'd love to talk with you about that today. But first of all, I'm curious, how did you find out about Bitcoin? How did you first hear about it?
Well, I'm a pretty pro-liberty guy, and I stay in tune with the workings and activities of those of you, such as your listeners, who are pro-freedom, and usually making up arguments. I used to be in academia where I had to make up a lot of arguments against pro-freedom people. Not to say that everyone in academia is anti-freedom, but there are certainly some. So I was just always very attuned to these issues, and I'm often having to debate them with myself or teach them to some people. So I've just stayed very attuned to issues of being pro-freedom versus anti-freedom.
Right. And that's sort of a natural fit, at least to me, with Bitcoin. So I can see how you ran across it there.
Sound money is all part of the discussion of being pro-freedom or anti-freedom. If somebody, wants freedom, they want a limited government because it's jealousy which causes us to bind down limited governments with constitutions. So if you believe in limited government, you're believing in how you constrain the power of government. If you're anti-freedom, you want unbounded government, and their lack of restraint including a lack of restraint regarding the money supply, and that the central bankers are able to, one way or another, central plan prices for money and create money at no cost. That basic distinction runs through, on the monetary side, runs through the pro-freedom, anti-freedom dispute.
You would consider Bitcoin part of the idea of sound money?
Yes, I would put Bitcoin on the side of pro-freedom because it's sound money.
Great.
Not subject to a central bank, but it has a lot of the advantages that are based on gold. Gold is limited in supply. That supply is moving at about 3% a year. It has for about 5,000 years. Humanity's stock of gold goes up 3% a year. It's built in. It's funny, there are strict mainstream economists like Charles Taylor who say we should have the Taylor rule, which is to run the monetary system but just basically set the price which new money gets created. It's 3% per year, and if we do that, that's just enough lubrication and everything will work. What they don't jump to, even though they're mainstream thinking within the box. What they don't jump to is, well, if you want a money supply where the monetary foundation is growing at 3% a year, just switch to gold. Or since we can't get them to switch to gold and gold doesn't work too well on the internet anyway, switch to Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin has that identical property. I don't know if it's 3%, but there is a certain amount of it's been mined, and the stock of it is going to go up at a few percent per year for 100 years or something, or not even 3% per year, but there'll be a little bit new supply. Anyway, Bitcoin has all the virtues of gold with the advantages of being able to something you use in a digital age.
Yeah, well, I can see that you've really put a lot of thought into this and that you've studied the economics behind just money in general and Bitcoin in particular. How long have you been aware of Bitcoin and how long have you been looking into this?
I first became aware of it about 2 years ago. There was an article in Wired or Fast Company did a story, and it was just a short story explaining it, and I think I even went online and read a little bit about it. But it was really quite nascent, and so I just kept an eye on it. And then sometime around September, I read another story. So perhaps it was about a year and a half. I didn't really hear much, and then I read another story about how it was catching on places, and when some places were failing, like Cyprus, the population, the shopkeepers went and converted into Bitcoin as quickly as they could and such, and so I started paying attention. But at that point, it was still quite foggy what the U.S. government's attitude was going to be about Bitcoin. So because they were still foggy, I didn't really pursue it too much.
Right. And when did you start to think about Overstock accepting Bitcoin?
Well, in November, there were some hearings in front of the Senate. And in those hearings, various government officials got up and basically said they don't see any reason. They don't see any reason or any way they can make Bitcoin illegal. It doesn't seem to violate any money laundering law. It doesn't violate this law or that law. Now it completely disenfranchises the financial system. So much of the financial system is about taking fees from you, and in order to move money, taking little nickel and diming to death with fees. It eliminates all of that. So that's so the financial system isn't going to like it, but from what I could tell, the powers that be, the establishment was saying, well, green light, we don't see any way to stop this.
Had you thought about it before that, but been concerned about sort of legal and regulatory issues?
I'd say from September and October, I had thought about it, but was concerned about, I don't want to get myself in another hassle with the feds. Leave a sleeping dog lie. But then in November, once I heard that they were saying that there was a Senate hearing, and I saw some of the quotes, I read some of the quotes. As soon as I saw that, I said, well, that's a green light. So by December, I was thinking, that Bitcoin is something we're going to do sometime in 2014, and that we have a bunch of big projects to do, but in the second half of 2014, our schedule should free up, and we should get around to doing Bitcoin. And I said that within the company, and I said that to a blogger, journalist. But then the story went so viral, went mainstream, it was picked up all over that we had decided in the second half of 2014, which I had meant as some sort of offhand comment. You can always promise something 6 months out. I just meant it in an offhand way. We'd get around to it probably in the second half of the year. Well, that story got so much circulation, it told me there was far more interest in Bitcoin than I had been understanding.
And so you decided to go ahead with it a little bit ahead of schedule.
Right. On December 29th and 30th, we sat there talking. The guys I work with were telling me, my colleagues were telling me, we could get this down to a month. We're looking at these different implementations, get it down to a month, a week of work, 3 weeks of testing. But we got on the phone, the head of a guy named Brian at Coinbase, told him our thinking, and he said, you could get it down even more than that. We'll send you somebody who knows it from our side and will help your people, and we'll send you a couple of people who will help your people, and we do this as a real sprint. I said, great. We put them in a room, get them hotel rooms, put them all together in a room, just feed them, take care of anything they need, and they get it done. Well, they started that. That was New Year's evening. They started the next day on New Year's Day. And by about 6 o'clock at night, they had come to the conclusion that they could get the thing done in maybe 10 days. And so it was really quite exciting. We took care of them for those 10 days. 40 people stayed in a room. I like to say we slid pizzas under the door, but that's metaphorical. But I said that in Forbes magazine, printed it in headlines or something. And they knocked it out in 8 days.
Do you consider yourself kind of a trendsetter? Because it's clear to me you were an early adopter of Bitcoin. You found out about it early, and Overstock is the biggest retailer in the U.S. so far to begin using Bitcoin. So are you hoping other companies will follow suit, or are you not kind of concerned about that?
Well, few different things. I do think that we're a trendsetter on all matters related to, say, freedom, being pro-freedom, and doing the right thing. I think we are a trendsetter. And just keeping up on things like this, so when they become available, being clued in on them before everybody else. My excitement, this is one of those innovations. And yes, we are, I think, what's called the first major retailer. And I think we came a long line looking back at what people were saying a couple months ago. They expected, the next merchant to sign up for Take Bitcoin would be a small, and then a medium, and then maybe some months later, a year later, they'd get one of the big guys. And now that we've done it, we've sort of accelerated the whole Bitcoin adoption, we think, by about a year. And as far as other people, normally when we do innovations, we hope no one else adopts them because the innovation gives us an edge. We hope nobody else adopts them. But in this case, it would have just the opposite effect, and I'm glad. By us doing this, all the big guys have to adopt it. Amazon, eBay, etc., they have to adopt it. I will be stunned if they don't, because, and maybe they were thinking of it 1 or 2 years down the road adopting it, but now they have to adopt it, because otherwise, as this piece of the market grows, and it's growing so quickly, and there's clearly such desire for it, as this piece of the market grows, they're ceding that to us. They can't afford. They don't want to do that. So I can almost guarantee you will see. And I don't have any inside information, but that you will see some of the big guys following us within a week. I mean, I'm sure there are teams now and other big companies that have seen what we've done, and they're saying to their people, "You've got 8 days to get it done." So I bet next week you start seeing other billion-dollar-plus retailers emerge, and once a couple more do, it will spread. It becomes harder and harder for anyone to stay out of it.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting.
I'm hoping, if I may say, at the risk of being crassly commercial, I'm hoping that it can become part of that it will become part of the Bitcoin lore, that Overstock was the company that made that big step, that broke that ice, and that showed that loyalty to Bitcoin before anyone major, when the rest of the establishment was doing what they could to stop it, and that by doing it, Overstock kind of forced open the adoption cycle of Bitcoin, and to complete the circle, so that if some Bitcoin users decided to shift some of their online shopping to Overstock.com, I would not object.
Right. Yeah. I think you should get credit for that too, because it's really exciting and amazing to me. Great. So do you personally use Bitcoin? Have you tried doing Bitcoin transactions and buying stuff? And what do you think about that?
I just got an account. Just this week. Somebody set me up. I did use our account to buy something on Overstock to get the thing started. Mm-hmm. But in terms of going out to buy things, no, I just got my account. I got my wallet.
Great. Yeah. And what did you think when you got to try it? Was it easier than using a credit card?
Smooth. On Overstock, it's very smooth. I thought it would be more complicated. It's very smooth, and the knowledge that I'm okay punching. Overstock already has my information. But I think that it gave me peace of mind to know that I'm not putting my Visa card number in someone else's machine, transmitting it over wires in a way somebody might possibly intercept it and do something with it. It gives me a good feeling to know that it's all the virtues I want in it are not being managed by humans somewhere who have to do their jobs, but are being managed by the rules of mathematics. Making sure the money is my money and hasn't been forged and all that stuff. That's mathematics. It is doing that, not any human. So it gives me a lot of confidence.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I've heard that you're not, or that Overstock is not actually keeping the Bitcoin as Bitcoin. When they get Bitcoin sales, they're kind of converting it into US dollars. Why is that? Is that you mentioned regulatory concerns before? Is that why you're doing that for now?
Well, Not really, although in order to keep them, there'll have to be a ruling from the SEC about how should this be put on your balance sheet. Presumably it should be treated like a foreign currency and marked to market at the end of each quarter. But our problem at the moment is if we kept Bitcoins on our account, they would just be accumulating because we pay our vendors in dollars. And if we pay our vendors in dollars, then we need to convert the Bitcoin into dollars so we have something to pay our vendors in. Otherwise, all of our cash would be, all of our dollars would go out and buy things from vendors. We'd sell them to the world, and some dollars, but also some Bitcoin would come back. And as you did that cycle over and over, eventually all your money is in Bitcoin, and there's no cash to use to go buy things with. So that's not plausible. However, it is our intent to be on the leading edge of the institutions that will develop to handle these other questions, like paying our vendors, paying our employees in Bitcoin. There's going to be I bet somebody out there right now, maybe someone listening to this show, is building. It would be very smart to build a payment system that tied into, say, an Oracle ERP system or a Workday ERP system or Great Plains or any of the accounting packages that says that for each supplier, they've chosen the option of accepting payment in BitPay, and that way, they get the money 10 days faster or whatever it is. And so you could start paying some proportion of your vendors in BitPay. And then once they're getting paid in BitPay, they're going to have employees who say, well, we'll take some pay in BitPay. That's especially going to happen, incidentally, when the dollar starts inflating.
Yeah.
When if we get to 20 or 30%, there's a bunch of people who are going to say, pay me BitPay. And then, so when we can start paying vendors and we can start paying employees, as that starts to move, we'll start saying, you know what, we'll keep 1 or 2% of the Bitcoins that come our way. We won't trade out of them, and we'll just use them to convert directly. We won't convert them. We'll use them to pay these other bills. And as we do that, and the economy does that, and Janet Yellen confirms the mistakes of Ben Bernanke, and these guys have checked themselves into a monetary version of a Roach Motel, and as they discover that, the joke dawns on them. If we have Bitcoinized our economy, so to speak, our economy will be robust in the face of the fragility created by what they're doing. And if that all breaks, if that experiment ends badly, that the U.S. government is currently doing QE, QE2, QE3, when that experiment ends badly, which I am confident it will, and I'm old enough to remember ways in which it can end badly, there are third world countries which destroy their currencies, and one of their ways out of it is they dollarize their economy. If the hyperinflation gets too bad, people can't even keep up with the prices, they dollarize their economy. Well, what we are doing are at least creating the channels to Bitcoinicize our economy. And, I hope we can get to 10 to 20% of our sales are in Bitcoin. We're paying 10 to 20% of our employment costs in Bitcoin. We're paying 10 to 20% of our vendor supplies in Bitcoin. We're getting more new coins from the customers. So we have that economy spun up in time so that if something bad happens to the U.S. economy, we already have in place a functioning, alternative, parallel, stable financial system, but one that is not prone to central banking manipulation.
How has it gone for Overstock just in the first week of accepting Bitcoin payments? Have a lot of people been taking advantage of it? Do you think it's going to be sustainable where you can get to, for instance, paying 10% of your suppliers and employees in Bitcoin?
It's definitely sustainable. We're having such an outpouring of support from the Bitcoin community. They have already gotten it to a point that I'll say I'm glad we've done it. It's no question we're going to keep it going as long as I'm running the company. It's already, there are so many hundreds and thousands even of people coming to our site now to buy something with Bitcoin and leaving messages or sending chats to our customer service agent saying, I've never been a customer of yours, but I am because of what you've done for Bitcoin. and I'm going to shift my shopping to you. And they placed a couple $100 worth of sheets orders, or they buy some furniture. And yeah, that's all we're asking, that they give us a look from now on when they shop online, if they want to thank us. But because there has been such an outpouring of this, I actually had the discussion with the board of directors yesterday, and was able to point out this has already moved from the experimental category to the it's part of our business model category.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. Is there anything else you want to add, Patrick?
Nope. It's an honor to work. It's an honor to through Bitcoin, finding the Bitcoin community and finding a lot of other pro-freedom fellow travelers in the country has been really illuminating, and I'm in your debt, and I hope that you will. All the people who write letters to thank me, and I want to be very modest. I don't feel I should be thanked, but if you do want to thank us, consider switching your shopping to Overstock.com.
Great. And Overstock.com, obviously, people can follow you on Twitter at, what's your Twitter handle?
I think it's Overstock CEO.
Okay, great. Patrick Byrne, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you talking with me.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Shop smart with your Bitcoin and get 3% back with Gift. On Gift, you can get gift cards with Bitcoin. Choose from over 200 retailers, including Target, GameStop, Gap, and more. Gift makes it easy to shop on Android or on the web. There are no additional fees, and when you shop with Bitcoin, you get 3% back. Go ahead, try Gift. That's GYFT.com.
The BitGive Foundation is a nonprofit charitable giving organization leveraging the power of the Bitcoin community to improve public health and the environment worldwide. Help us demonstrate the significant impact of Bitcoin in addressing these critical issues on a global scale. Support international giving in Bitcoin. Please visit our website at www.bitgivefoundation.org. That's www.bitgivefoundation.org.
Hey listeners, we're jumping into this bid license hearing about an hour in. The first speaker is the presenting gentleman from New York. The panelists include Barry Silbert, founder and CEO of Second Market, Jeremy Liu, partner at Lightspeed Ventures, Fred Wilson, partner at Union Square Ventures. The panel wraps up with Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss of Winklevoss Capital Management. Enjoy.
Do you think it's fair to say, and I think it's in all of your testimony, but I just want to hear if you want to put any gloss on it or any nuances, that going forward, the virtual currency world to sort of thrive and succeed and become more mainstream is ultimately going to have to really embrace regulation. Like I think I said in my opening statement, there are some people in the Bitcoin community from the libertarian side of things that want government to just leave it alone. Would you say regulation is both inevitable, but more importantly, actually ultimately going to be crucial for the survival of virtual currency?
I think one of the challenges you have as a regulator with respect to Bitcoin is that it's a global phenomena. And if you look at the landscape, both kind of from a regulation perspective and tax perspective, you're seeing a lot of different approaches to how to regulate Bitcoin and how to tax Bitcoin. And I do believe that, I think Jeremy made the point earlier, that one of the reasons why the dominant exchanges are located overseas is because of the uncertainty around how those businesses should be regulated. And I think, unfortunately, I think that's a missed opportunity. And I do hope that we kind of right the ship and the dominant exchanges end up in the U.S. and, quite frankly, here in New York. So I think over time, the regulators are going to have to come up with a way to treat Bitcoin that is balanced and thoughtful, but also recognize that this is a global phenomena. And as much as certain policymakers, certain regulators may hate the idea of Bitcoin, typically once they dig in, they come to appreciate the power of it, recognizing that the companies are going to get created, jobs are going to get created, innovation is going to happen. We've got to figure out a way to do it in a balanced way so that it happens here in the U.S. and hopefully here in New York.
Mr. Liu.
Speaking selfishly as an investor, I think that having clarity around regulation that's based in the U.S. And here in New York, which can serve as as a positive example for other regulatory regimes as they develop around the world, is likely to be a very positive thing. I think that, again, it needs to be balanced and it needs to be appropriate so that the innovation can occur, because if it isn't, then that innovation will occur outside of the boundaries of the U.S. And, again, as an investor, that's less interesting to me, and I frankly think it's less good for consumers.
Mr. Wilson, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that there's going to be regulation. There should be regulation, and clarity is important. The other thing that I think is important is to recognize that many of these new companies are 2, 3, 4-person companies. And it's very difficult for them to do the same thing that J.P. Morgan Chase does. I think when they grow up, they should be expected to do exactly the same thing that J.P. Morgan Chase does. But I think there needs to be some idea of a on-ramp to regulation that is inviting of these young companies to engage with the regulatory environment in a way that they can actually do it. That's the issue. It's not that they don't want to do it. It's like, I got to run my servers, I got to write my code, I got to deal with my customers, and I got to apply for money transfer licenses in all 50 states. And so I just would encourage you all to be mindful of that challenge and not expect a 3-person company to be able to do the same thing that a global company with hundreds of thousands of employees can do. And I think if you do that, I think everything should be just fine.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and I think the Winklevoss brothers mentioned this in their testimony, in their written testimony as well. Look, we, on the regular old banking side, forget the internet for a minute, and the virtual world, we deal with the mega banks who have thousands and thousands of people working there, but we also deal with about 80 mostly upstate community banks, some of which have 10, 15, 8 employees. And one thing we're always cognizant of is not applying the same compliance costs or imposing the same compliance costs on a J.P. Morgan or a Goldman Sachs that we do these smaller community banks. You would drive them out of business. And sometimes when you see some of the federal regulations that are hitting those smaller community banks, I once got a call from a CEO who said, I now have 3 loan officers and 12 compliance officers. And I said to them, well, your business is going to fail under that model. And so I think it's something we're certainly cognizant of. The flip side, of course, is we want to make sure that, yes, there's this on-ramp period, but how do we ensure, again, we're moving away from a world where illicit activities are going on and more towards a world where we're encouraging innovation, we're encouraging exchanges to come to New York, we're encouraging more high-tech companies to come and build new architecture on top of what's already being built here in New York and elsewhere in the U.S., as opposed to pushing it offshore. But it's a very tricky proposition to get that balance right. That's what we're trying to do.
Well, it's good that you already have some examples with the community banks where you understand this and you've come up with ways to deal with it. I think that should be, a roadmap for how to think about some of these really small Bitcoin companies, and so that's very encouraging to hear.
I would add one other point, which is I think the sort of cost part of the regulatory burden is definitely one issue for the small companies. The time part is also another very important point, because these small companies, they're driven on innovation, and the quicker that they can cycle their innovation, the more likely you are to see really new, interesting, novel ideas coming out of them. And that's why sort of long holding periods and things that prevent them from getting to market quickly, not cost issues, but time issues that prevent them from getting to market, finding a customer, and finding that product market fit can really dampen innovation as well.
Yeah, I was a good metaphor for this is the music industry. So there are literally thousands of startups that have wanted to create new music listening experiences over the past 15 years. And it takes 2 or 3 years and probably several $1 million of legal fees to get the rights to stream music legally. Most, say 95% of those companies aren't going to build something that more than 5 or 10 or 20,000 people actually even care about. So the idea that you would require every single one of them to get fully licensed by the music industry before they even know if they built something that matters makes no sense. And yet that's how the music industry is operated. And when a startup walks into the offices of a music executive and says, I've been operating for 6 months, now all of a sudden the service is working and we're really successful, and now we need to get rights. The first thing that they're handed with is a lawsuit, right? Like, that's not the right way to engage with a young entrepreneurial company. And so I just think as long as the regulatory environment doesn't behave that way too, and understands that sometimes an entrepreneur needs to build something and put it in the market to see if anybody even cares before they go and ask for the permission to operate, that's actually a good thing, and that we should allow that societally. We should allow that to happen across all industries. And then once it turns out that there's a real business there, the money will come, the regulation will come, and all of that can happen in good time. That's really important.
Yeah, and a good counterexample that has encouraged that would have been, for instance, Google or Facebook APIs, which are free up to a certain point, and therefore encourage the innovation. But then after they reach, after a customer starts to reach a certain size, then it's a business relationship.
Yeah, no, look, I think there's a lesson for regulators in there too, which is, again, our money transmitter rules were written way back, and the process was often much slower, and it frankly didn't matter. It wasn't that the technology of the money transmission that was behind the money transmission businesses we were licensing wasn't changing every few months. And so it didn't matter if the licensing process took a year, 9 months, whatever it is. About 2 years ago, when we started to see applications for money transmission from the likes of Google and Facebook and the different wallets that were out there, realized that our normal procedures and our normal processes had to be modernized. They didn't make sense anymore in a digital age, and that by the time we were licensing someone, the technology had changed entirely. It was a fool's errand. So I think we're going to have to, as we consider whether we need a bit license or something like that, we also need to think internally at DFS about how we can be a more modern digital regulator. It's not simply what our rules are. It's also who we employ, how quickly we act, what our reviews are like. There's a lot to do.
Here's one thing to just think about. It would seem to me that step one in a modern regulatory framework would be for an entrepreneur to simply let you know that they're operating in your state. Many entrepreneurs tell me that they don't want to do that because if they were to do that, your response could be, probably wouldn't, but could be, to shut them down immediately. And so that they choose not to do that. If there were a safe harbor of some sort for an entrepreneur who willingly notified you that I am in business, I am operating, and I am operating in your state, and then that there was some time period, a year or 6 months or 12 months or 18 months or whatever that time period is, I don't know what it is, for them to move through the licensing process in partnership with you, but that they wouldn't necessarily be shut down. They knew that they wouldn't be shut down for simply reporting that they're operating. Then you would know of everybody who's operating in your state because there would be no reason not to report. And anybody who chose not to report would clearly be, probably not on the up and up. So something like that is kind of what I'm talking about.
Let me raise you one. How would you react to a safe harbor that if you want to qualify for the safe harbor, you also need to have you need to show some basic level of Bank Secrecy Act, anti-money laundering, compliance rules put in place?
I think the question is how burdensome are those things for a 3 or 4 or 5 person operation, and the lighter that they are, the more that they can be implemented in code as opposed to in labor, and the more that someone could get compliant quickly with those things. I think those are good ideas. I think if it requires somebody to go raise $1 million or hire 5 people, then that could be hard for people, and that again might cause somebody to not self-report. So I think that's really the thing you want to think about is if you can encourage people to be compliant, because the cost of being compliant, at least initially, is not very large, and then over time that cost just grows as their business either grows or doesn't grow. I think that's a really good regulatory approach in the modern age.
If I may, but isn't that where you folks come in? Regulation has always been a barrier to entry in every market. And the way you've just described a 2 or 3 person operation can, in worst case scenario, wreak havoc. And we need to be very careful about that. So just simply knowing that someone is operating is not a sufficient safety net. Isn't it the role of the investor to analyze any one particular business plan over another and say, there's something here, and sufficiently fund, and you have a natural selection going on such that when you do open the door, you have adequate money laundering protections, you have adequate solvency, all these things are in place. It'd be great in any industry if you could just open the door and let folks run out and give a shot. But it's one thing when you're dealing with copyright violation, it's another thing when you're dealing with a situation where someone could be sending terrorist funding or engaging in some other illicit activity, which after the fact we found, a few months into it, even though they told us, would be tremendously problematic.
Well, I think there's 2 separate issues that you raise. One is the due diligence that we do when we make an investment, and we certainly do that due diligence. We want to make sure that the company's operating on the up and up, and we want to make sure that they have some compliance in place and they have some know your customer in place or things like that. That may not be the level of compliance and anti-money laundering and know your customer that you might expect. So there could be a gap there. The other issue I think you need to think about is that we may choose not to invest in a company if they can't get licensed by you. And so there's going to be this chicken and egg problem that gets in the way of innovation, where an investor's not going to plunk down the $2 or $3 million that it's going to take to get licensed until you're licensed, and then nobody's going to get funded. So I think these are in some ways theoretical conversations, but I think it's important for you all to understand our world and the world of the entrepreneur, so that at least you can be open-minded to some of these things. You have your job, you got to do it. We got our job, we got to do it. The entrepreneurs have their job, they got to do it. But the more we understand the realities of each other's jobs, I think the better off we're all going to be.
And the one thing that I would just modify, Fred's comments is, if that's the condition of entry for a company to be started in the U.S. or in New York, then maybe we won't do it. But if that same company could be started in the U.K. or in Germany or somewhere else, then maybe that innovation just gets pushed offshore, and that seems like a net loss to the U.S.
Look, again, it raises a broader question, and maybe we'll have, and I'd like to get your opinions on this, because maybe we'll have different perspectives. If the choice ultimately is between preventing money laundering on the one hand, and I probably even shouldn't use the word money laundering because it's too nice a word, frankly. Money laundering is the facilitation of all kinds of horrific crimes that I think everyone in this room never wants to see happen. Narco-trafficking being one, but acts of terrorism, funding rogue nations, et cetera, all take place through massive money laundering. Now, we have it in our system as we do now, but if to have money laundering, if the choice for the regulator is permit money laundering on the one hand or permit innovation on the other, we're always going to choose squelching the money laundering first. It's not worth it to society to allow money laundering and all of the things it facilitates to persist in order to permit 1,000 flowers to bloom on the innovation side. I think the question is whether we can get somewhere in between where we're very comfortable that we're preventing the money laundering, but still allowing innovation. But I guess I would open it up to the panelists. I could start down here. Would you agree that ultimately, if the choice is, and maybe this is an unfair question, but ultimately the choice is between getting rid of money laundering but squelching innovation, that we all agree the first job is to get rid of the money laundering, all that it facilitates?
I mean, I agree there's definitely a tension there. Nobody wants to see money laundering. But I think we can reach that middle ground and understanding in hearings like this, just keeping a very open dialogue so it's not us versus them or regulators or this mysterious body. I think we can find that dialogue and middle ground where we can kind of have a firm understanding and we don't lose innovation, but at the same time don't permit criminal behavior.
I agree that I don't think anybody wants money laundering. When we first saw Bitcoin, about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, I don't think anybody would deny that it was a bit of a wild west because there was no regulation, there was no framework to evaluate the asset, evaluate companies, determine who was compliant, who was not. And a Wild West, attracts cowboys. And I don't think anybody here would disagree with the fact that a sheriff would be a good thing. It's just how do we sort of apply that law? I kind of like the concept that Fred brought up about a bit of a safe harbor where if you register and let us know what you're doing for a certain period of time so we can kind of build our technology and focus on what we do well, and the investors can focus on what they do well, which is basically coming up to speed on Bitcoin, doing the due diligence on the startup, as opposed to having to become also a regulatory expert. I think that will at least allow these sort of nascent companies that are small with small funding from sort of building their technology and seeing if it works, and it also sort of doesn't have to necessarily recreate. Basically, the culture of investors is not to basically be paying millions of dollars into startups to make sure that they're compliant. And I'm not saying that that will always be the case, but I think it's one of the things entrepreneurs have sort of run their head up against is going to investors and saying, I need capital for this and also this huge sum for regulatory compliance and lawyers. Now, I think one potential outcome that could come from the type of regulation that we're talking about is startups that are geared towards helping other startups be compliant. So for just like a startup doesn't, generally speaking, they would outsource their email suite or applications to, let's say, Google Apps. They're not worrying about their IT. They're basically outsourcing that to the cloud. If there's clear regulation, I would not be surprised if there's other companies that come out and say, look, if you're an exchange or you're a money transmitter or you're dealing in Bitcoin and exchanges to fiat, we're going to help you be compliant. We're going to take that, offload that burden from you and take care of that. The problem right now, though, is there's no sort of clear regulation where the companies can basically be licensed as a compliance type company. So that's just one outcome I see that could potentially solve the problem that we're all talking about here.
It's an interesting idea because certainly there is an entire industry right now helping banks try to stay compliant, for better and worse sometimes, with our BSA AML rules. And certainly there's an industry already out there that could, maybe part of or a piece of it could be spun off more into the virtual world to try and help fledgling companies do that. But it would be a way to ensure that, yes, it's a small company, yes, we want them to innovate, but at the same time, we just can't live in a world where we're going to permit money laundering to go on.
Well, that sounds like a terrible idea to me. You're talking about introducing all of the costs back into the system that we're trying to take out of the system. Okay, let's just understand what we're trying to do with Bitcoin. We're trying to create a world where transactions can move globally for free, okay? And making these companies hire, some outsourced compliance firm is a bad idea. The good idea is to put the compliance into the code. Okay. Just yesterday, I opened a bank account with Deutsche Bank because I got distributed some stock from a venture fund I'm in, and Deutsche Bank was the agent who was processed. So I have to open a bank account. I had to fill out 5 separate pieces of paper. I had to file an AML form. I had to file an account opening form. I had to file out a W-9. I had to file out, make sure that I wasn't a partner in some brokerage firm, all this stuff, right? If I could have just authed with my Facebook account, okay? If I could have just gone to the Deutsche Bank website and auth with my Facebook, they would have gotten most of that information directly from Facebook, and they could have onboarded me instantly. That's the idea of putting it into code. Now, you may say, look, Facebook can't act as the know your customer provider for the world. And maybe that's right or maybe that's wrong. I don't know. Maybe LinkedIn plus Facebook plus Google plus my social security number plus my global entry number. I don't know what it is, but something like that could handle AML, know your customer, in code, as opposed to this really heavyweight compliance infrastructure that we're now enforcing on companies, is the right answer. That way you can do compliance at scale for no money, and we can drive the cost down to the consumer of doing transactions down to zero. Of course, we need to stop bad people from moving money, but by making me have to fill out 5 forms, I'm a good guy. That's not a good answer, in my opinion.
EasyDNS is the Swiss Army knife for your domain names, helping meet their customers' individual needs since 1998. EasyDNS has been an outspoken critic of SOPA and CISPA. EasyDNS was an early supporter of Bitcoin, and now they are proud to sponsor this show. Do business with a company that shares your values. Get a 13% discount when you pay with Bitcoin. Go to bitcoin.easydns.com and be sure to use discount code LTB. Hi, Stephanie here. Would you like to turn your book into an enthralling audiobook? Need a persuasive commercial to promote your company? How about a narrator for your explainer video? Here's where I can help. I'm a freelance voiceover artist, and since 2009, I've lent my voice to dozens of audio projects. To hear some examples of my work, check out my website, smvoice.info. If you like what you hear, I'd love to be the voice of your next project. Get in touch at smvoice.info.
Hello, everyone. I'm George, and we are NEO. We'd like to think that we're one of the biggest startups in the Bitcoin community, and we're based in Cyprus. Can I see a show of hands? How many people actually knew where Cyprus was before March 2013? It's not everyone. All right. So the recent events of March exposed Cyprus to the planet and actually showed us that monetary systems are not as safe as we all thought. So we had, especially Danny, our CEO, Danny Brewster, who couldn't be here because we're very close to launch and he couldn't make it. So I'm replacing him for this. He had this thought of how could you actually build infrastructure on a vertical scale, not on the typical horizontal scale that most Bitcoin startups are doing, to actually bring Bitcoin to the masses, bring about more adoption with ease of access and convenience, like mostly, more or less, what they knew already. The only thing they knew already was banks. But banks do not suffice, of course, and we have Bitcoin, which is far better. So we went on an adventure, actually, trying to create all these services one by one. So I'd like to welcome every one of you to the NEO economy, as we call it. We believe that the people are the NEO economy. They are their own banks. And beyond the management team that we actually have, we have 12 more full-time employees. We have a dedicated team of developers, Pitas and Valerkos. They're very skilled. They build banking systems in the background, and they've been working with us for the last 5 months, developing all the infrastructure that we need in the background. We have a lot of people for KPMG, our auditing, our accounting services, and we have 2 specialized legal services for the financial industry that we'll see further down the road, and all the corporate structure that we want to build. So the people, we had to build everything from scratch. We had to recruit all the people. We have to develop all the manuals and processes, train them into not only understanding what Bitcoin is, but actually transmitting this knowledge to other people who are not tech savvy. We had to man all the stations that we're building with 24/7 web support and telephone support, and personal contact with anyone that actually requires it. We have one of the first companies who have a dedicated compliance officer, which actually communicates all the AML and KYC processes to the regulatory bodies within Cyprus. Our internal legal counsel, he's sitting somewhere back here. So we have enough people to actually build a physical, personal contact point to everyone who needs to know what Bitcoin is and how it can benefit him. So it all starts from the people. Beyond that comes the building. Our first branch is going to be delivered in the mid of February, which is like 20 days away from here. We tried to go with an open and transparent design, more friendly, nothing that looks like a bank, because we keep reminding people we're not a bank and we're never going to be a bank. We don't want to be a bank. So this is how it looked yesterday. It's a far cry from the previous one, but just keep in mind all the materials have been ordered and they're ready, and the only thing that's missing is the assembly. So what we'll be doing at NEO. Initially, we'll be able to physically exchange Bitcoins for fiat currencies and provide to the customers what we call the time-locked accounts. It will be an introductory measure so that people get accustomed, without risking money, how do the time-locked accounts work. So the limit of the time-locked account will be 500 euros, and the initial term will be 3 months. So we're taking the personal bet that the Bitcoin exchange rate is not going to drop that significantly in these next 3 months. So what will be happening is they can buy the Bitcoins at a price of 500 euros, and we guarantee that at the end of this term, regardless of what the Bitcoin exchange rate does, it will still be 500 euros. And we can guarantee that from our reserves. So we measured the numbers properly so that regardless of the traffic that we have, we can facilitate that easily. So in the meantime, if the price rises, the customer will get a percentage of that growth, if it happens. The next stage will be, once we've developed the infrastructure and we're able to hedge against our own risk, we'll be able to offer euro-pegged accounts, which is something that we feel is necessary in the economy, but it's also very, very hard to implement. How do you guarantee to a person that the value of his money is always 1,000 euros, the initial money that he brought you? To do this, you have to add or subtract Bitcoins from his account so that you are always able to have a floating price of around 1,000 euros. And that could be very, very profitable as a proposition, but at the same time, it could be very, very risky, because you'd need huge amounts of reserves. So that's why we're postponing it for now, and we're implementing it down in the future. At the same time, we're building on the ease of purchase with EasyCoin. EasyCoin is one of the fastest ways that we could develop to gain access to coins from any side of the planet that can accept a cash payment. Your AML and KYC is done within the first hour, and if you have a Bitcoin wallet, you log in, you create your account, and you get your Bitcoins within the hour. So we've completed all the work on the software background that's needed, and we've done the internal testing. What we need to develop a bit further are the cash payment providers. And we have a large network of countries which are about to come in. Some of these countries are in Latin America. Some of these countries are in Europe. So we'll see exactly how that pans out. We'll update any news through our forum, and especially the Bitcoin community, which provided all the funding for our initial startup. So in the US, we were aiming to actually start with the US, but there's conflicting legal status with FinCEN and everything. We have different lawyers saying different things, so this will have to wait for a little bit longer. Beyond that, we have the B payment network, which is something which works in tandem with the NEO accounts, because it allows merchants to accept Bitcoin payments and have them transferred immediately to euros in their account without any kind of fees for internal transactions, and with instant settlement, and the customer protection program, which as far as we know has not been implemented yet in any Bitcoin payment system. So these POS terminals that we will be shipping to the merchants they will be pretty open. So anyone who has Bitcoins on their smartphone can actually pay on the spot in several hundred places, we hope, by the summer in Cyprus. The day that we're opening the branch, on the 24th of February, we're having a big merchant conference in Nicosia, And the next day, we're having the same conference in Limassol, which are the two biggest cities in Cyprus. So we already have a lot of interest from these, from merchants who have actually are fighting for profits in this market. It's become very competitive, and there's a big monopoly on the payment systems. So anything that we can actually do to help them, it's really, really appreciated. So beyond that, what we feel is missing from what we call the new economy is actual responsibility. And responsibility can be guaranteed by using Bitcoin through us being as transparent as possible and us being as liable to the law for anything that we do with our customers' Bitcoins or our customers' funds. So in that spirit, we're applying for a Cyprus investment firm license, which is the most responsible license we could get in Cyprus. It is passportable throughout the European Union, and it allows us to perform in full regulatory framework these kinds of services. So we'll see for the first time that we can actually receive, transmit orders, execute the orders on behalf of clients, deal with our own accounts, manage portfolios of clients, provide investment advice, underwriting financial instruments, which is very, very important for the Bitcoin economy because it needs a place where new businesses can get their funding. And if we can underwrite instruments like shares on profits on them and actually be able to audit them on how well their prospectus performs, we can actually have a more decent structure to get funding to Bitcoin businesses. Market making, which is a very, very important part that's missing from most major exchanges, the fact that we don't have enough liquidity, that the market is shallow, and at the same time enjoy a number of ancillary services which will help us provide the conventional services which are missing from the Bitcoin economy right now. So this will allow us to actually build a trading platform which is regulated. And this is important because anyone who trades needs to know that his money is safe, that the exchange is not going fractional, as there's rumors around, and they need to know that it's a platform which is audited in the background. So we're customly building our own platform, built to perfection via all the work that the open source community has done on some levels, proprietary development on other levels. One of the key differentiating aspects that we'll have is the multi-signature aspect of Bitcoin, which we feel has not been implemented enough, and we feel can actually alleviate some of the risk of trust. Because as the person who developed the open transaction said before, Bitcoin was not built for trust. Bitcoin was built to be transparent and a trustless system, and we very strongly believe on that. So I'll explain the multi-signature process down the road. So we'll be licensed by the Security Exchange Commission of Cyprus, SISEC, to provide all the contemporary instruments, financial instruments that are missing. And especially with what regards to the service that we want to offer, the Euro-pegged accounts, we need options. And in order to provide the time-locked wallets, where we're essentially guaranteeing to them that we'll buy a financial instrument at a future date with a set price, this is an option. And we need to be able to provide options. Oh, this will all take place with the CIF license. Beyond that, we're still not satisfied with our eggs, so we're going to develop what we call neo portals, which are going to be dedicated BTMs built from scratch again, that can be able to facilitate neo wallets. If anyone has an account on a neo wallet, which can also be online, can transact with the BTM in a dual functionality way, insert fiat, take out Bitcoin, insert Bitcoin, take out fiat, regardless what you need. We'll be dedicating development will begin in March, and we also found it easier to actually expand with the BTMs first, and then invest on building new branches, training new personnel. So we'll gather data from the BTMs and build along the branches throughout Europe or any other country that has the enough potential to be actually useful. Now, one of the biggest problems that we've encountered is counterparty risk. And this is exactly the reason that Bitcoin was developed, the trustless aspect that we were talking about before. So if we had institutional investors who actually wanted to get into Bitcoin, we feel and we've seen and we've had input from funds, exchange traders, brokers, that currently the risk is too high. At the same time, we've seen that Bitcoin businesses are also taking a huge risk upon themselves because they face counterparty risk from any bank that could, at any moment, shut down their account and actually leave them hanging and dissolve their whole business model from where it is. So one of the announcements, if anyone is looking at the forum, our forum for the IPVO, that we wanted to make today, is that one of the steps that we're taking to alleviate this risk is we're actively looking into purchasing an interest in a financial institution, in a bank. So there was this discussion before that banks should buy Bitcoin companies, and we're adamant about it, that we want it to be the other way. Bitcoin businesses should be buying banks and actually teach them how it should be done, how transparently we can actually work. So that's the beginning of it. Moving on with that, all our wallets in NEO, B, and the trading accounts will have a multi-sig transaction system implemented. So this means that at any point, a user will have a private key, will hold a private key, and the third entity, which is unrelated to us, transparent, and probably a multi-billion-dollar company I cannot announce yet, I'm sorry, will hold the third key. So in case we disappear, the customer's money is still there, it's accessible, perfectly accessible, and out of our own reach. If something happens to the customer, he loses the private key, he passes away, there will be a legal structure in the background of getting the Bitcoin safely out, which is what we need. And at the same time, thank you. At the same time, we'll have the same implementation for the trading platform, which we feel is very, very important. Because the brokers will have one key, we will have one key if the platform is working with us, and the same trusted party will have another key. So there's no counterparty risk for wallet holders or brokers. The last thing I'd like to show you before we go is a sneak peek of the teaser trailers that we're showing starting the 1st of February throughout Cyprus. We're going on a blitzkrieg approach, so we're going to bomb the media with 7 different teaser trailers for 3 weeks, and by the opening date we'll have these 7 trailers will continue into 7 commercials about it. I'd like to see these trailers and then explain to you what exactly it is that you're seeing so you don't get a wrong impression, because it's important. I want to thank you, and before that, let me go. Our approach regarding the VAT concerns would be that since Germany and the UK is planning on doing the financial instruments, as we see, we'll feel the same approach is correct for Cyprus and throughout Europe. So that's the approach we're taking with the regulators. All right. Thank you from me. Let's see the teasers, please.
Είναι τεράστιος, με 2 πολύ δυνατά χέρια που μπορεί να σε σώσει άμα κινδυνεύεις. Έσωσε και τον παπά μου και το θείο μου και όλο τον κόσμο.
Νίο, έρχεται και όλα αλλάζουν.
Είναι super hero και κάνει έτσι και κερδίζει πάντα και πολεμάει τους κακούς και...
Ποιος είναι ο Νίο?
Before I finish, please wait, just a second. So the conclusion of this is that after all the teasers, Neo has built like this shadowy image of the superhero, and in the end, every character who stars in the trailer actually opens his shirt, and there's a Neo written under it, which means that each and every one of them is Neo, which is our goal to promote the superhero within everyone that can take the economy in his own hands and actually be the savior of himself and his family. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to episode 79 of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Overstock interview was produced by Stephanie Murphy, edited by Adam B. Levine, and featured Patrick Byrne and Stephanie Murphy. Bit license was graciously provided by the Livestream Broadcasting It. Neo with George was captured and produced by Stephen Malagatti, edited by Adam B. Levine, and featured George Papagiorgio. Music was provided for this episode by Jared Rubens, General Fuzz, and Calvin Henderson. Questions or comments? Email Adam at letstalkbitcoin.com. Have a good one.